Hello, my name is Emma. I want to tell you about my journey. How I learned English step by step at home. It wasn't always easy. I was shy, I made mistakes, and sometimes I wanted to give up. But I didn't. I kept going, one small step at a time. And now, I can talk about my day in English with confidence. My journey with English did not begin with confidence. It began in silence, in a small room with one window, a little desk, and a heart full of fear. I remember the exact moment I decided to do something about my English. I was sitting on my bed with my legs crossed, staring at a notebook filled with words I could understand, but could not say out loud. For months, I had tried to memorize vocabulary, watch English movies, and read small stories. But speaking? That felt like climbing a tall mountain barefoot. Every time I thought about talking in English, my heart beat faster. What if I said something wrong? What if I forgot the words? What if I sounded silly? One morning, while everyone else in the house was busy, I closed the door to my room and stood in front of the mirror. I looked at my reflection and whispered, "Good morning, Emma." My voice was low, shaky, unsure. It didn't sound like me. I cleared my throat and said it again, louder this time. "Good morning, Emma. How are you?" I smiled at myself, even though I felt strange. Talking to a mirror wasn't something I had done before. But that day, I made a small promise to myself. I would speak one sentence in English every day. Just one. I didn't know if it would help, but I knew staying silent wasn't helping either. I picked up a pen and wrote the sentence I had just said. Then I added another. I wake up at 7 a.m. I repeated it aloud. I wake up at 7 a.m. I didn't worry about my grammar or if it was perfect. I just wanted to speak. I wanted to hear my voice in English. That one sentence became two, then three. I brush my teeth. I take a shower. I wear my favorite t-shirt. These were normal things, simple actions, but saying them in English made them feel special. I felt like I was building something small, but strong, like laying bricks to make a home. Each morning I added more sentences. I made it a little game. I would walk around my room and describe everything I did. I open the window. I make my bed. I fold my blanket. Sometimes I would even pretend I was giving a tour of my room to someone who didn't know English. This is my desk. I sit here to study. This is my lamp. I turn it on at night. It may sound silly to someone else, but to me it was powerful. For the first time, I wasn't just learning English. I was using it. I kept a small notebook on my table. In it, I wrote the new words I said each day. If I didn't know how to say something, I looked it up and then used it in a sentence. One day, I wanted to talk about making tea. So I learned the words: kettle, boil, tea bag, cup. Then I said, I boil water in the kettle. I put the tea bag in the cup. I felt so happy just because I could describe this small action in English. It felt like magic. How one word could make me feel more free, more confident, more ready. There were days I didn't feel like speaking. Days when I woke up tired or upset. But I kept going. Even on those days, I stood in front of the mirror and said something. Anything. I feel sleepy today, or I don't want to study. The important thing was to keep the habit alive. Speaking became like brushing my teeth, something I didn't skip. And slowly, without even noticing, my voice changed. It became stronger, clearer. My sentences got longer. I no longer paused after every word. I no longer felt afraid of my own voice. What surprised me the most was how my thinking started to change. In the beginning, I had to translate every word from my native language to English in my head. But after a few weeks, my mind started using English first. When I woke up, I thought, what time is it? Instead of saying it in my own language. When I saw the sun, I thought, it's a beautiful morning. These small thoughts in English made me feel like I was becoming a new version of myself. Someone braver. Someone who was learning to express their thoughts freely. I also noticed that I was smiling more during this practice. Talking about my day, even simple things, gave me joy. I would say things like, "Today I cleaned my room," or "I danced while folding clothes," and it made me laugh. I didn't need anyone to talk back to me. I just needed to feel the words come out of my mouth. I was building trust with myself. I was proving to myself that I could do this. One day, I recorded myself on my phone. I stood in the middle of the room and said, "Hi, my name is Emma. I live in a small town. I like reading books and making tea." I played the recording and listened to it carefully. My voice sounded nervous but also kind. I made a few small mistakes, but it didn't matter. I was proud of that little recording. It was proof that I had started. Over time, I added more emotion to my sentences. I didn't just say I had lunch. I said, "I had a delicious lunch with my mom. We laughed about something funny," she said. I wanted to feel the words, not just say them. That's when something important happened. I stopped thinking about grammar. I stopped worrying about being perfect. I just spoke. I talked about my day like I was telling a friend a story. Sometimes, when I opened the window, I spoke to the birds outside. "Good morning, little birds. I hope you're having a nice day." I laughed at myself, but I didn't stop. I began talking during every small task. While folding clothes, "These are my jeans. I wore them yesterday." While brushing my hair, "I think my hair looks nice today." While putting on my shoes, "I'm going outside for a short walk." These tiny conversations with myself changed everything. I didn't need a classroom. I didn't need a teacher. My room became my classroom. My voice became my teacher. And my confidence became my reward. One morning, as I stood in front of my mirror, I said something longer than usual. "Today, I want to write about my day in my notebook. I want to speak more and use new words." I felt something change inside me. It was no longer just practice. It had become a part of my life. English was not a subject to study. It was a tool to share my thoughts, my emotions, my stories. That night, I sat on my bed with my notebook. I looked at the sentences I had written earlier and smiled. Then something new happened. I picked up the pen and wrote, "Today, I went to the market with my mom. We bought fresh vegetables. I carried the bags. It was hot, but I felt happy." I paused, read it aloud, and thought to myself, this sounds like the beginning of a real story. I had no idea that this small evening writing habit would grow into something bigger. Speaking had helped me build words. Now writing would help me build stories. And that's where my next step began, talking about my day like it was a real story, a story that belonged to me, a story I could share out loud, sentence by sentence, with joy. After many weeks of practicing simple sentences in my room, I realized something had changed. I was no longer just saying, "I brush my teeth," or "I make my bed," like a robot listing tasks. The words had started to feel like pieces of a story. My story. And one evening, while writing in my notebook about my day, I paused and thought, what if I didn't just list what I did? What if I described it like I was telling it to a friend? What if I told it like a story? That night, instead of writing, "I went to the market," I wrote, "This afternoon, my mom and I walked to the market together." The sun was hot and the road was dusty, but I felt excited. I carried 2 bags, and one of them was full of fresh tomatoes. My mom joked that I looked like a walking vegetable shop. I laughed, and so did she. When I read it aloud to myself, I smiled. It felt so different from before. It was still simple English, but it had life in it. It had feelings, color, and memories. I didn't stop there. I closed my notebook and stood in front of the mirror again. I imagined I was talking to someone, maybe a friend I hadn't seen in a long time. I looked into my own eyes and said, "Let me tell you about my day." I took a deep breath and spoke slowly. This morning, I woke up to the sound of birds singing outside my window. The sky was bright and the air smelled fresh. I sat up, stretched my arms, and said to myself, "It's a new day." I walked to the window and opened it. A soft wind touched my face and I felt happy. That was the first time I told my day like it was a real story, and I loved how it made me feel. I wasn't just speaking in English anymore. I was living in English. I didn't worry if I forgot a word or made a mistake. I just kept going, like I was telling a friend something important. I talked about how my mom made pancakes and how one of them was shaped like a heart. I talked about how I spilled juice on my shirt and had to change again. I talked about how I saw a cat sitting on our garden wall, staring at the sky like it had a secret. These were small things, but when I told them like a story, they felt special. The next day, I decided to try something new. After dinner, I sat in my room and turned on the voice recorder on my phone. I told my day like a bedtime story. Once upon a time, in a small house with blue curtains, a girl named Emma woke up feeling a little sleepy but also full of ideas. She put on her favorite t-shirt and brushed her hair, ready to start another day of learning and laughter. I smiled while recording it, and when I listened to it again, I felt proud. Yes, it was just me talking, but it didn't feel boring. It felt warm, like a cozy book. After that, I made it a new habit. Every evening before bed, I sat on the floor, leaned against my bed, and talked about my day like a little story. I didn't care if nobody else heard it. I was doing it for me, for the girl who used to be afraid of speaking. Now that girl was not only speaking, she was storytelling. I began adding more feelings to my sentences. I didn't just say I ate lunch. I said I had lunch with my mom. She made rice and curry, and it reminded me of the way my grandmother used to cook. The smell filled the kitchen, and I felt comforted, like the food was giving me a warm hug. These were words I hadn't used before. Comforted, reminded, hug. They came to me because I allowed myself to feel while speaking. I even started using voices and expressions. If I was telling about a funny moment, I laughed and used a playful tone. If I was talking about something that made me a little sad, I slowed down and let the feeling show. I wasn't acting, I was being honest. And the more honest I was, the better my English became. It wasn't about being perfect. It was about being real. One evening, something special happened. My cousin Lily came to visit and stayed in my room while I was doing my bedtime story practice. She was about my age and already good at English, so I felt a little nervous. But she smiled and said, "Can I listen?" I hesitated, but then I nodded. That night, I sat down and told my story like I always did. I talked about how I helped Mom bake cookies and how I accidentally used salt instead of sugar. I made a face while telling it, and Lily laughed. When I finished, she clapped and said, "Emma, that was so fun to listen to. You're like a little storyteller." Her words made me feel proud and a little surprised. I never thought of myself as a storyteller, but now I realize that's exactly what I was becoming. I was using English not just to describe my actions, but to share my life. After that, I wanted to improve even more. I began asking myself questions to help shape my story. Instead of just saying what I did, I asked, what was the best part of my day? Did anything funny happen today? Did I learn something new? These questions helped me go deeper. If I had a quiet day, I still found something to say. Today was quiet. I didn't do much, but I watched the rain fall. It was peaceful. I listened to the sound and thought about how rain always makes me feel calm. Even a slow day became beautiful when I told it like a story. On weekends, I tried something even more fun. I created small stories from my imagination based on my real day. For example, one Sunday I was too lazy to get out of bed, so I told it like this. This morning, Emma the sleepy princess refused to leave her royal bed. She hid under her soft blanket and said, "Today, I will rule my kingdom from under the covers." But then her royal mother knocked and said, "Time for breakfast, Your Highness." So Emma, the brave, finally rose to meet her royal eggs and toast. I giggled while saying it, and it made English feel like play. Sometimes I would even talk to my stuffed bear, Max. I'd sit him on my bed and say, "Max, today was a little crazy. First I spilled milk on the table. Then I forgot where I put my notebook. But I still finished all my reading." You would have been proud. Talking to Max helped me feel like I had an audience. Even when I didn't, he never judged, and he always listened. That was enough for me to keep going. Little by little, this habit changed the way I saw myself. I stopped thinking of English as something outside of me. It became part of who I was. I started seeing stories in everything, in the way my mom tied her hair, in the color of the sky before sunset, in the way my slippers made a funny sound on the floor. Everything became a moment I could describe, share, and celebrate. One day, I looked back at my old recordings, the ones where I just said, "I eat, I sleep, I read." I smiled at how far I had come. I was no longer the girl afraid of long sentences. I was the girl telling stories with joy, with emotion, with confidence. And the best part? I still had so much to learn. So many new words to use. So many new stories to tell. That evening, I sat on my bed, looked out the window, and began. Today, something beautiful happened. I didn't feel nervous while speaking English. I didn't worry about mistakes. I felt free, like my voice had found a place to live. And that place was in every story I told about my day. As I finished saying those words, I looked around my room and thought, what if I shared my story with someone else? Maybe someone out there felt the same way I did in the beginning. Shy, unsure, stuck. Maybe my journey could help them start theirs. And that's when the idea came. If I could talk about my day like a story, maybe I could also talk with others in English. Real people, real conversations, real voices. And that is how I found myself stepping out of my room, not just physically, but emotionally. I was ready to speak not just to mirrors, bears, or walls. I was ready to speak to a real person. After I started telling my day like a story, something inside me shifted. It was like I had unlocked a small door in my mind that had been closed for a long time. Every night when I told my story aloud, I felt closer to myself. But I also knew something important. I needed to speak more. And I needed to see myself doing it. That's when I returned to something simple but powerful. The mirror. The mirror had always been there, right across from my bed. In the past, I only used it to fix my hair or check if my shirt looked okay. But now I started to see it differently. It became my partner, my silent listener, and my biggest teacher. I decided to make a new promise to myself. No matter what happened during the day, I would speak in English to my mirror every single night. At first, it felt a little silly again. Even though I had practiced with it before, this time was different. Now I had stories to share, not just simple sentences. I stood in front of the mirror, looked myself in the eyes, and said, "Good evening. Emma, how was your day?" My own reflection smiled back. It felt strange, but in a good way. I wasn't just practicing English. I was practicing being confident, being open, being present. That night, I talked about my day at home, how I helped Mom fold the laundry, and how the bedsheet got stuck in the washing machine. I told the story with actions, with emotion, and with laughter. I watched my face as I spoke. I saw the way my eyebrows moved when I was surprised, how my mouth curved when I smiled. It felt like I was learning a new part of myself through English. Every night I continued the habit. Sometimes I stood. Sometimes I sat on the edge of my bed and leaned closer to the mirror. I played with my expressions. I practiced saying things slowly, then a little faster. If I made a mistake, I didn't panic. I just paused, smiled, and said it again. I was learning to be kind to myself in English. I also started noticing little things about how I spoke. I watched the shape of my mouth when I said words like thought, through, and though. Those words used to confuse me, but in the mirror, I could actually see how they looked when I said them. I paid attention to my tongue, to my lips, to my breathing. It felt like a secret lesson that only I could give myself. One night, something funny happened. I was telling the story of how I accidentally dropped a whole box of cereal in the kitchen. As I acted it out, making big hand movements and silly faces, I started laughing. I laughed so much that tears came to my eyes. I looked at myself in the mirror, laughing, speaking in English, completely unafraid, and I thought, this is what freedom feels like. I didn't feel like a student anymore. I felt like someone enjoying a conversation. After that, I started to treat my mirror like a friend. I even gave her a name, Ella. I'd say, "Hi, Ella, it's me again," and begin talking. This small change made a big difference. When I gave my reflection a name, it became easier to open up. I wasn't just practicing, I was sharing. I told Ella about my fears, my dreams, my funny mistakes, and even my quiet moments. And through all of it, I used English. I began experimenting with voices. If I had a conversation during the day, I would replay it in front of the mirror. I would say my part and pretend to be the other person too. I practiced different tones, like happy, curious, tired, or surprised. If I heard a phrase in a movie or a song, I tried to copy the voice and mood. I wasn't doing this for anyone else. I was doing it because it made English feel alive. There were evenings when I was tired and my voice was soft. Still, I stood in front of the mirror and whispered my day like a bedtime tale. Today was quiet. I read a book and it made me think of my grandma. I miss her stories. I wish I could tell her one now in English. Saying these things out loud made me feel close to the people I loved. My mirror became a space where English and emotion met, where I could be my real self. Over time, I noticed something wonderful. My fear of speaking was disappearing. Slowly, gently, like fog lifting in the morning. I no longer feared the sound of my own voice. I no longer worried about saying the wrong thing. I didn't need someone to correct me. I just needed to speak and listen to myself. On weekends, I added something new to my mirror practice. I chose a topic and spoke about it for 2 or 3 minutes. My favorite food, a place I want to visit, or something that made me laugh this week. I would pretend I was recording a video for someone learning English. Just like me. I didn't actually record it, I just imagined it. And that made it feel real. Sometimes I would even stand tall, like a teacher or a news reporter. I'd say, "Good evening and welcome to Emma's English Journal. Today's top story. She finally learned how to make French toast without burning it." I played these roles not because I wanted to become someone else, but because it helped me enjoy the process. I was learning through play, through performance, through imagination. And every night I ended the practice the same way. I looked at myself and said, "I'm proud of you. You're doing great." I said it in English, clearly and kindly. I didn't rush those words. I let them land in my heart. Because they were true. No one else had seen how hard I was trying. But I saw it. And my mirror saw it too. Of course, there were hard days. Days when I felt tired or when I doubted myself. Sometimes I stumbled on words or forgot how to say something. Sometimes I felt silly talking to a reflection. when other people were watching TV in the next room. But I reminded myself, this is your space. This is your practice. It matters. And I never skipped a night. Not one. Little by little, the changes started to show. I found myself thinking in English more often. I'd walk to the kitchen and hear myself say in my mind, I wonder what's for dinner tonight. I'd look at the sky and think, the clouds look like cotton candy today. These thoughts used to come in my native language. But now English was becoming my second skin. Then one evening, something very small but very beautiful happened. I finished telling my story in the mirror and turned to leave the room. Just then, I heard my mom walking by, and she paused at my door. Emma, she said, were you talking to someone? I blushed a little and said, just my mirror. She smiled and said, well, your English sounds really natural now. I'm proud of you. That moment stayed with me. It wasn't a big compliment, but it meant everything. Because it came from someone who had watched me since the beginning, when I could barely finish a sentence without looking down. Now here I was, speaking freely, with a spark in my eyes. Practicing with my mirror every night didn't just teach me words. It taught me confidence. It taught me rhythm. It taught me how to breathe with my words, how to smile when I speak, how to believe in my voice. The mirror never interrupted me, never corrected me, never rushed me. It gave me the space to grow. And I took that space and filled it with stories, dreams, laughter, and love. Now, as I sit here remembering those nights, I feel a quiet joy. My room, my mirror, and my voice. Those were the tools I used to build my English. Not expensive classes, not fancy books. Just time, honesty, and a deep desire to speak from the heart. And all that practice, all those late-night stories in front of the mirror, were leading me to something even more exciting. A step I had always been afraid of, but now I was ready. Because soon I would take my voice beyond the mirror. I would speak to someone else, and this time it wouldn't be my reflection smiling back. After many nights of talking to myself in the mirror, I began to feel something new, an inner calm that I had never felt before when speaking English. My words were no longer strangers. They were starting to feel like old friends. But even though I was gaining confidence with myself, I knew I needed to go further. I had practiced alone for so long. Now, I wanted to understand how English really sounded in the world, how people used it in real life, with emotions, with rhythm, with energy. That was when I turned to something simple. Something almost everyone uses every day, videos. One afternoon, after school, I was lying on my bed scrolling through my phone when I stumbled upon a video of an American girl doing her morning routine. She woke up, smiled at the camera, and said cheerfully, "Good morning, everyone. Today's going to be a great day." That sentence echoed in my head. I liked the way she said it. Her voice was warm and her words felt alive. Without even thinking, I sat up, turned off the sound, and repeated after her voice from memory. "Good morning, everyone. Today's going to be a great day." I stood in front of the mirror and tried it again. I wasn't just saying the words. I was trying to be her. To copy her tone, her smile, her confidence. That was the beginning of something beautiful. I had found a new way to grow. From that day on, I made watching English videos part of my daily life. I didn't just watch them for fun. I watched them like they were lessons. But not boring lessons with grammar rules or vocabulary charts. These were lessons of real life. People ordering food, sharing stories, giving advice, or just laughing with friends. I saw how their words danced in the air. I heard how they connected thoughts. How they used little phrases like, I guess, actually, and kind of. I began with short videos, 3 or 4 minutes long. I watched them with subtitles first. I would pause after each line, read it, and then say it out loud. Not once, not twice. Sometimes 5 times. I wanted to sound just like the speaker. I imagined I was acting in a movie, trying to match the voice exactly. If they laughed, I laughed. If they whispered, I whispered too. At first, I felt strange. There I was, alone in my room, talking back to a phone or laptop screen. But slowly it became fun. It felt like I was joining in the conversation, like I was part of their world. And that world was full of energy, emotion, and English that felt real. One of my favorite channels was about travel. A girl named Chloe would take her camera everywhere, from the mountains in Colorado to the streets of New York City. She talked about everything: food, people, feelings, funny moments. I didn't just watch her. I copied her. If she said, "I'm so excited to try this," I paused the video and said the same thing, mimicking her face and voice. Sometimes I watched the same video 3 or 4 times in one night. I wasn't bored. Every time I noticed something new, a little pause, a hand gesture, a way she used her voice to show surprise. These were the details I wanted to learn. English wasn't just about saying words. It was about how you lived those words. There was one moment I'll never forget. I was watching a cooking video, and the host was explaining how to make pancakes. He said, "Okay, now we flip it, boom. Golden brown, just how I like it." I repeated that part again and again. Boom. Golden brown, just how I like it. I laughed at myself, but I also felt something important. I was finally enjoying the language. I wasn't afraid of it anymore. After some time, I started creating a small system for myself. I made 3 steps for every video I watched. 1. Watch with subtitles, to understand the words. 2. Repeat out loud, to copy the sounds and feelings. 3. Watch again without subtitles, to test how much I remembered. This small system helped me so much. It made learning feel clear. I knew what to do every time. And it gave me little wins. I could see progress. I could hear myself improving. My sentences sounded smoother. My voice was less shy. I even started speaking a little louder. One weekend, I found a video where a girl was talking about her bad day. She said things like, "I missed my bus. I spilled coffee on my shirt. And my phone died. Ugh, what a mess." I repeated the whole video line by line. But this time, I also added my own feelings. I said, "Ugh, what a mess." And I let my shoulders fall. I even sighed just like she did. It felt real. That night, when I looked in the mirror, I told the story of my own bad day, how I lost my notebook and got caught in the rain. I copied the way the girl in the video had shared her day. I said, "I lost my notebook, then it started raining. Ugh, what a mess." And I smiled. I wasn't just learning, I was performing. And it felt amazing. Some days, I picked videos with more serious topics, like personal stories, interviews, or short documentaries. I wanted to hear different kinds of English, not just fast talking, but soft and thoughtful voices too. I noticed how the speakers slowed down when they talked about something emotional. I learned how to use silence, how to pause after a deep thought. Those videos taught me how to speak not just with words, but with meaning. After a few weeks of repeating videos out loud, I noticed something interesting. My ears became sharper. I could hear more. I could catch small words I used to miss, like it's, "Don't, they've." These short forms used to confuse me, but now they made sense. I wasn't just hearing them, I was feeling them as I said them. Another big change was in my pronunciation. Before, I struggled with words like world, thought, or comfortable. But after hearing them so many times in videos and saying them out loud again and again, they became easier. Not perfect, but smoother, more natural. My tongue and mouth were getting used to the dance of English. Soon, I started using what I learned in videos during my mirror talks. I mixed my words with the phrases I heard. I would say things like, "Today was kind of wild," or "Honestly, I didn't expect that at all." These were real English expressions, not textbook lines, and I felt proud using them. Sometimes I even created little scenes in my room. I would watch a video of someone at a coffee shop, then pretend I was the customer. I'd say, "Hi, can I get a small iced coffee, please?" Then I'd switch and pretend to be the barista. "Sure, that'll be $3. It was like playing a game, but a game that was teaching me how to talk. My favorite part was that I could learn anywhere. If I was in the kitchen, I'd repeat what I remembered from a video. If I was outside walking, I'd say a line softly to myself. English was no longer stuck in my room or in my mirror. It was becoming part of my life. One evening, my younger brother heard me practicing. He peeked into my room and said, "Who are you talking to?" I smiled and said, "A video." He laughed, but then he asked, "Can I try too?" And so we started practicing together sometimes. I'd play a funny clip, we'd watch it, and then both of us would try to copy it. His voice was still young, but he had fun with it. It felt good to share what I had learned. But even on days when no one was around, I stayed committed. I watched. I listened. I repeated. Not just once, but over and over. I didn't care if it took 10 tries to say one line correctly. I just cared that I was getting better. And one day, while brushing my hair, I caught myself speaking without thinking, "Today's going to be a good day." I had heard that line 100 times. Now it came out of me like it was mine. And in that moment, I realized something very special. The English I was learning through videos wasn't just someone else's language anymore. It was becoming part of my voice. All those nights of watching, repeating, and playing with words were building a bridge from my quiet room to the big world out there. And soon I would take the next step. I would begin to use my English, not just with myself, not just with a mirror, but with people. I was ready to connect. The day I realized English was starting to feel like my own voice was a quiet morning. I was brushing my hair and softly said to myself, "Today's going to be a good day." I paused, staring at my reflection, and thought, wait, I just said that without even trying. It felt natural. It didn't feel like I was practicing anymore. It felt like I was simply speaking. That small moment gave me a big idea. I had spent weeks talking in front of my mirror, copying videos and building confidence in my room. But now I wanted something more. I wanted to know how I really sounded. Not just in my head or in my reflection, but in real sound. What did my voice actually sound like when I spoke English? Did I speak clearly? Did I sound too slow? Did I sound scared? There was only one way to find out. That evening, after dinner, I walked back into my room and quietly closed the door. I picked up my phone, opened the voice recording app, and hit the red button. For a few seconds, I didn't speak. My heart beat faster, even though no one was there but me. It felt different. Recording felt more serious, more real, like someone was listening, even if it was just my future self. Then I began. "Hi, my name is Emma," I said slowly. "Today I want to talk about my day." My voice shook a little and I stopped. I erased the recording. I felt nervous. Why? I'd said these same words so many times in front of my mirror, but something about knowing I would hear it back made it scarier. It was like holding up a mirror for my ears. I took a deep breath and tried again. This time I kept going. I woke up early this morning. I made tea. It was cold outside, so I wore my favorite sweater. I studied for a little while and then went for a short walk. Click, stop, save. My finger hovered over the play button. I was scared to press it. What if I didn't like what I heard? What if I sounded bad? But I reminded myself, this wasn't about being perfect. It was about growing. So I pressed play. My voice filled the room. At first, I winced. It didn't sound like the voice in my head. It sounded softer, a little uncertain. But as I listened more, something strange happened. I began to smile. Because there it was, my voice speaking English, for real. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. That one short recording changed the way I practiced from that day forward. Every night after that, I made it a habit. Talk, record, listen, improve. It became my secret teacher. I didn't need anyone else. I didn't need a classroom or a lesson plan. I had everything I needed in that little red button. I started simple, talking about my day, just like I did in front of the mirror. But now, I was also listening back to myself and finding places where I could get better. If I said, I go to store, I'd hear it and realize, wait, I forgot the. I'd try again. I go to the store. Much better. Every time I listened, I learned something new. I also paid attention to how I said words. I once recorded myself saying, comfortable, and when I listened back, I heard how awkward it sounded. It didn't flow, so I went back to the videos I had watched. I found someone saying the same word and repeated it over and over. Comfortable. Comfortable. Then I tried again on my own recording. The next time I listened, I noticed a small improvement. It was like polishing a small stone each night, slowly, gently, carefully, until it began to shine. Soon I began giving myself little speaking challenges. One night, I recorded a story about my childhood trip to the zoo. I described the animals, the colors, the smells. I tried to make my sentences longer and smoother. Another night, I talked about my favorite movie, trying to explain why I loved it so much. I realized how hard it was to explain feelings in another language. But I tried anyway. That's how I learned words like magical, funny, exciting, and touching. Each recording became a step forward. But there were moments of frustration, too. One evening, I recorded a long story. I was proud while speaking, but when I listened back, I noticed I had said he go instead of he goes about 5 times. I felt disappointed. Why am I still making these mistakes? I whispered. I almost gave up that night. I closed the app and sat on the floor. But then I remembered something my dad once told me when I was learning to ride a bike. If you don't fall, you're not trying hard enough. That memory made me smile. I opened the app again and re-recorded the same story. Slower this time, more careful. He goes, she goes. I said each word clearly. That night my voice felt stronger. I also began noticing things about my tone, not just grammar or vocabulary. Some recordings sounded flat, like I was just listing facts. I woke up. I ate breakfast. I went outside. It felt cold, so I started to practice saying things with more feeling. I woke up really early today. I ate the best pancakes ever. Then I went outside and it was so sunny. The change was amazing. My recordings began to sound more like real conversations, not just homework. I laughed more. I used my hands when I talked, even though no one could see me. I was learning how to be myself in English. Then one day, something incredible happened. My cousin, who lives in California, called me. She usually spoke slowly when we talked, because she knew I was still learning. But that day, she was in a rush. She spoke fast, and for the first time, I understood everything. I was shocked. I said to her, "Wait, you don't need to slow down." I got it. She laughed and said, "Wow, Emma, your English is amazing now." After the call, I cried a little. Happy tears. Because in that moment, I saw all those nights talking to myself, recording my voice and listening back, had truly worked. My ears were trained. My voice was ready. I became more creative with my recordings. Some nights I pretended I was a radio host. I would say, "Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Emma's Night Talks, where we share stories and smiles." I would share something from my day, add a joke, and end with, "Thanks for listening. See you tomorrow." It felt silly but also fun. It kept things light. And more than that, it made me fall in love with speaking English. Over time, my confidence grew. My voice no longer shook. I didn't pause between every word. My sentences flowed better. My mistakes didn't scare me anymore. I knew I could hear them and fix them. And that's the thing about recording yourself. It's honest. It doesn't lie. It doesn't flatter you or criticize you. It simply shows you where you are and helps you go forward. One night, after many months, I listened to my very first recording. That soft, scared voice saying, "Hi, my name is Emma." I smiled. I didn't erase it. I kept it, because it reminded me of how far I had come. Now, recording myself is not just a practice. It's a part of me. Sometimes I record for fun. Sometimes I record when I feel sad, just to let my feelings out. Sometimes I record silly songs or pretend interviews. English is not just something I study anymore. It's something I live. And that little red button? It became my best teacher, my best friend, my mirror for the voice inside me. I had walked a long journey, starting with simple sentences, turning my day into stories, practicing with my mirror, copying voices from videos, and now recording my own voice and learning from myself. Each step led me here, and now I was finally ready for the world to hear my voice too.